Haley probably watches this shit.
Watches what shit? Hair clips is what my headphone cable overlaid my feet.
Oh yeah, that's it. My cable's
just-
way too long, so it just gets like caught around my neck.
Yeah, so I have these hair clips, and I clip it to my lapel, so it's just like, because otherwise also if I turn my head one way or the other, I can hear the cable kind of, I
Yeah.
don't know, and I don't know if the mic
Little
picks that up.
Oh, the mic picks up everything. And welcome
Yeah.
to episode, what are we at, 25, Kathy? You always know all this stuff.
Yes, episode 25.
We are
Can
at
you
episode
believe it?
25,
That's like our
and
silver anniversary, our silver week-iversary.
Weekiversary, yeah, because we podcast every week. All right, we're going to make sure this Facebook, guys, if you're on Facebook, make sure you say something. Thanks, Wade. Nerds. I'm going to try to keep track of, hey, John. Welcome to the podcast.
Oh, hi,
And not
John.
in the house.
So we're going to make sure everything works, make sure everybody says everything, make sure it goes okay. Welcome to episode 25. We're going to be talking to, if you notice, John's not in the house. We have Trevor. Trevor's going to be talking about his new game that he's got, he's going to be working on, doing a bunch of stuff.
Breachstorm.
Breachstorm. Breach in the Storm. That's what you should name it, with beer.
So Jim typed it into the search as Breech, and I said, no, that's a totally different thing. That kind of Breachstorm.
Yeah, yeah. It's a little more adult themed than ideally, I think.
It's a whole different game.
Whole different game.
It's very different.
So, like I said, John is out for the week, and we will having Trevor to talk about his game today. Guys, before we do that, we have to do our tradition. And with that tradition, we have to talk about what we're drinking today. Kathy, what you got on tap?
I'm just drinking the Captain with some Diet Coke, the classics.
The classics. And Trevor, since you're kind of new to this, are you drinking anything funky today?
No funky drinks today, unfortunately.
Why
I've
not?
had a flu for the last couple days, so I'm taking it easy.
Oh, you've got the con crud. That's right.
Hit me pretty hard, unfortunately.
That was the Captain con crud.
Yep.
Yeah. So with that said, I am also, let's see, I'm going to be doing what I did on that when I was painting. I'm going to drink another Winter Grind. And of course I have the worst cookies in the world for you to munch on, which is those sugar cookies with, like 80 pounds of frosting. I think each one of them is like 1,050 calories.
Those cookies are amazing. Talk about heresy. They
Yes.
need an exterminatus because I cannot stop eating them.
Oh, I know. They're completely horrible for you. So with that said, guys, let's have a good night. Cheers.
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 That's still good beer. That's real good beer. Hey, Trevor, you want to taste?
I would love. Yeah. Could you just pour some down there?
Yeah, there you go. Take a sip.
Just pour it in the mic. Yeah.
So, all right. So, Trevor, we have you on the show because you have a new game coming out.
Yeah.
And the name is Breachstorm.
Yep, with EA.
EA.
Spelled Breachch.
The other one.
With that said, I've actually seen these rules and talked about these rules a lot more than everybody else has because I've been part of the beta to look at them, or alpha, I should say. Wasn't it alpha?
Alpha, beta, omega, whatever.
Yeah. The giant chicken.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I've been looking at those rules and stuff. And you and I have actually talked about it before because you had some questions about other things going on with what you were doing. But let's talk about the quick and dirty. Um, we're all about the fluff, and I know that you're still working on that. What's the story? What is Breachstorm fluff wise?
What's the universe?
Yeah,
So the setting.
yeah.
Um, so it's a science fiction universe. It's sort of essentially framed in the distant future. It's far enough in the future that sort of humanity has forgotten its ancestral homeworld. It's Earth is sort of a bygone memory, but it's set in sort of the stellar space around where we are in the galaxy. So it's not an enormous galaxy spanning setting. It's within a couple thousand light years of where Earth is. But essentially, there are several factions that control this area of space. The technology has advanced to a point that sort of large-scale conflict is too destructive, really, to be beneficial to anyone. The big engagements are usually taken care of by these enormous war fleets and orbital bombardments and fusion bombs and nanoviruses and all these things like that. So the game is framed around sort of black operations, special forces trying to complete specific objectives and they're deployed by these big factions, kind of off the books, in order to grab intelligence from each other or destabilize their hold on specific sectors. And it's essentially just an intergalactic Cold War, an interstellar Cold War between these large factions of the game.
Okay. One thing I noticed when we were talking is that this is going to be a small model count game. This is not going to be like 100 models or 50 models or 40 models. It's going to be like 10 to 12.
Yeah, the average team size for a list is going to be like between 6 and 8.
Okay.
So you're going to have 12 to 16 models on the table, basically.
Okay. We actually have a slideshow, and we're going to go through the slides. If you could talk about the slides and just give a little insight to our viewers about what it is, I'll bring that up. Give me one second. So these are some of the pictures that you sent us, and these are all, of course, work in progress. These are not final artwork and everything. Who are we looking at right now?
Yeah, so this is So we have 4 factions to start with. 2 of them we've essentially going to fully design the first wave of releases for. The other 2 are going to be we're going to design them, but we're not going to sculpt or cast anything. There'll be stretch goals on our Kickstarter, which is happening this summer. This guy's from one of the first 2 factions. He's from a faction called the Homeworld Confederacy, which is the human faction, and he's part of their sort of marine unit type, and he's a support gunner. So essentially, this guy goes along with fire teams of Marines. The sort of backbone unit type in that particular set is a rifleman, and the whole theme of this group is that they essentially have overlapping buffs they're able to give each other that make their attacks more powerful the more they work together. So not only do they become more accurate the more they shoot at single targets, but this guy in particular has special ammo types he can apply to his gun that can apply debuffs to enemy models. He can give them what are called suppression tokens, which stop them from moving, and he can also increase the amount of damage they take and reduce their resilience against damage, basically. But the idea is that for this faction anyway, they use a lot of electromagnetically propelled projectile weapons, so coil guns or rail guns, and they basically fire this caseless ammunition that they're able to adapt on the fly within the weapon, so that they can do a lot of cool stuff. And most of the kind of a theme of a lot of the models in this particular faction is that they can do a lot different things with their ranged attacks. So yeah, I don't know if we have any more of those guys.
We
Show.
do. I do have a
Sweet.
question. You
Ask away.
I noticed that of course this is a 3D render from a software, and the base is square, but it actually is going to be on a round base, as in we've got coming up. Correct?
Right. Yeah, they'll be on 30 millimeter round bases, just like a War Machine model or something like that. Yeah.
Okay.
Now, does it come on the base, or is it going to be separate and you attach it to the base? Or will I have to cut it off of its base so that I can make a base for it?
They will. They'll have like just a mounting bar, that'll go into a slot of base.
Okay,
Basically.
like a sprue. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
All right.
All right. Next picture. It looks like another 3D render, and these look like
It's an
your
exciting screenshot from my phone.
yeah.
Cool.
Like the cat people.
You guys are really getting the inside track.
I love the cat people.
Yeah. So these guys are from a faction called Zrenthar Prides. And I think I sent you a couple models that I painted up for
I got those a little bit later.
Of these sculpts, yeah. The guy on the top there with a gun is called a pack leader. So this faction, they're felinoid, so they're cat-like, and they have a lot more emphasis on close combat, and their society has sort of a strict code of honor. And so and so the gimmick of the faction essentially is they get what are called fury tokens when friendly models around them are destroyed. I'm getting a note from. Can you guys hear me? Okay.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. You're good.
Skype is telling me that I'm having an issue with my.
Don't listen to it. You're fine.
You're fine.
Oh, now.
Am I coming through?
Yeah, you're fine.
You're fine. Guys, let us know. Trevor says he's having some issues on there. If you can hear him, make sure to let us know.
Yeah.
Everything sounds to be good on our end, but we want to make sure.
Okay. Theory interruption there. I don't know what's wrong. Maybe I'm loose on my connection a little bit. Anyway, so these guys get these fury tokens when models around them are destroyed, and the fury tokens let them make additional melee attacks. So they're trying to get to close range to get some put some hurt on, and sort of as they're approaching up the field. If you're running into a gun line or something, you're going to become more powerful the more the enemy shoots at you, essentially. So the guys who end up getting there are going to pack a wallop, basically.
All right, and then our next one. This is like one model with a 3D rotation.
Right. Yeah. So that's just a screenshot of the rotation. Yeah, that's a pack warrior. He's the sort of base infantry for the Zrenthar Prides, which is the name of the faction. They have this cool plasma weaponry. So you can see he has his gun there. He also he carries around swords on his back to hit people with. But the idea is obviously a plasma weapon fires these sort of pockets of ionized gas. The cool thing about them is that the way the game works, essentially the higher you roll on an attack roll, the more damage you're going to do because the attack's more accurate. These guys have a very low threshold to do minimum damage essentially on their ranged attacks because they don't need to directly hit their target with the attack because any hit around you is going to shower you with this like superheated gas and radiation. So part of the part about this plasma weaponry is that they're able to ding you up a little bit just by shooting the cover around you essentially.
Somebody a thing from space just came on and said that you have tail armor on your cat, and they love that you have tail armor on your cat.
Absolutely, they have to keep those tails nice and safe.
Also, are they prehensile? I mean, can you make a tail attack with those with spikes on it?
They don't have a tail attack currently.
I feel like they should.
Yeah.
All right, our next one looks like we have some 3D printings of some models.
Yes, these are some of the models that we printed to demo with. The guys on the left there, the clear plastic guys. We printed them from Shapeways, and they were those are the riflemen for the Homeworld Confederacy faction in parts. So the final sculpts will look a little bit different. We'll probably recut the partitions a little bit between the bits. So I'm not sure if those are actually the parts that are going to come in.
Okay. Yeah, and everybody should know that these are all this is all early work progress. This isn't final work. I mean, definitely You can't. I mean, because I want to bring up something because I was listening to your stream that you were doing on Friday, and I'm going to bring that up when we get a little bit later in the progress, especially when we get to the painted pictures, uh, based on what we saw, and what I saw on the stream. So it looks like some more 3D renders for the cat people.
Yeah, so yeah, these are more pack warriors. We actually have three different sculpts for each of the generic infantry for each faction. So the riflemen for the Homeworld Confederacy, and then the pack warriors for these guys for the Zrenthr. We ended up only using two of each for the demo because we didn't need that many models. But so there are still some sculpts that are as yet unseen, or some poses for these guys that we haven't shown off yet.
Okay. Looks like another one of the Marines.
Yeah, so that's the support gunner from a different angle this time. He's got the regular Marines don't have quite heavy armor. As this guy, he's got some augments, but you can see there on his arm he has you can see that's the exoskeleton of his armor, and so that's what sort of contributes a lot of the sort of lifting power, because it's going to be sort of a self sustaining, or it can hold itself up basically. I don't know, I lost my word.
I gotcha. Yeah, it's an exosuit.
Right. Yeah. And so he has a heavier set, so that he can manage the recoil of that weapon, because it's going to be pretty hefty.
Okay. Let's see. Another pose.
Yep. And there's the rifleman. So that's just like that's the pose that we had for the 3D prints. But yeah, that's just the basic rifle.
I'm sorry. How many poses are the Confederacy guys in?
So we have three different poses for the rifleman, and then we have one pose so far for all the other unit types. Most of the factions are getting 6 unique profiles.
Okay.
So we'll have between 6 and 9 sculpts, give or take. And we might do some alternate poses for the Kickstarter, and just some other ones just for fun, I think.
That'd be cool. A lot of people really like the Kickstarter exclusive, like alternative characters and stuff.
Yep.
All right, we got Baldy.
Yeah. So this is Lucas. He's a Homeworld Confederacy character. He's cool. There's 2 characters so far for the Confederacy faction, 2 unique characters, and they're both very different in their scope. Essentially, the way the game works is that you have a number of these officer models that can command your troops around, and usually you'll bring 2 to 3. But each one can bring significantly different strengths and weaknesses to the orders that he's able to give his troops. This guy in particular is very static. He's very supporty. He's able to heal his troops, and he's able to make their weapons more accurate when he commands them. The other character for this faction, which we don't have a sculpt yet for, is called Bastion. He's actually a Zrenthr, so he's a cat person who works with these guys, and he's a lot more aggressive. He's able to move his guys around, and he actually he makes them more accurate when they attack targets that are around him. So he's kind of leading from the front and trying to get up the table.
Okay, so you said the cat people, Zrenthr, they have a model for this faction, or is it for you're just saying the 2 leaders? This leader is for the Human Federation, the other one is for Zrenthr.
Yeah, so there's so Bastion is he's an alien who works with the Human faction.
Okay. That's cool.
He's so he's
like a double agent, a traitor.
Essentially, sure. Yeah.
All right, so let's see. Another cat pose.
Yep. So that's another pack warrior pose with his sword out, ready to lay down some smacking. And then here are some poses, or some pictures we took at our at Captain Con, some demos and some exhibition games. So you can see these guys. This is Zrenthr sort of moving up the table behind some cover. This is from our demos. The guy who's being pointed at right now he's a pack leader. He's the field officer we had in the demo for this Zrenthr faction. and
What's
then you can
the
see.
what's the clear
Yep.
plastic thing?
So that's one of the scenario elements that we had for the demo. You can see on the top right hand corner, there's a dude who's got a little box behind him. He's carrying it around, and that's basically an intelligence package that he's trying to get into that clear zone. And every turn he's able to keep it in that zone, it would score his team a point. All of the scenarios in the game are asymmetric, so that's how the Zren were scoring points in this demo scenario. The homeworld guys on the left-hand side scored points by interacting with. There's a little console you can sort of see to the left there, and they were trying to call in reinforcements and sort of shoot down the craft that was coming to exfiltrate the Zren operatives. So they were trying to raise the alarm basically, and so they would score points by interacting there. So. We're trying to showcase that sort of all of the scenarios are going to be asymmetric and work. You'd have different ways to score for each side.
Gotcha.
And then some more demos. You can see we're showing off some of the cool tokens we got. We had these were acrylic proofs basically we had made by Broken Egg. Ideally, we're going to have punchboard tokens available with the game, or you can sort of upgrade and get the acrylic versions as well. But you can see the true Zern guys back there have those red tokens next to them, and those are Fury tokens because one of their guys was shot down, and so they were getting pretty angry.
Gotcha.
And then, yeah. And this is a picture that I took from a full game that we played out at Captain Con. This was, I think, right after deployment, so these guys were just about to storm around the corner and shoot some aliens.
Another action pose.
Yep, some more demo pics. You can see the guy on the left there carrying the box around. Xander's asking, there are only 2 factions right now. We have 2 factions basically fully designed. We're going to have 4 in total. And we're coming out with our open beta within the next couple of weeks, and we'll have rules for all 4 factions available. So you'll be able to give them a try. The other 2 factions are really cool and have some really cool mechanics as well. But the actual sculpting and casting for those obviously will be a significant chunk of change. So those will be stretch goals for our Kickstarter. And so ideally, if we hit all our stretch goals, we'll have all 4 factions available at release.
So I know one of them is like insectoid, but what's the other one?
So the Volucrit hosts are the insectoid guys, which are pretty cool. They're kind of a little more hoardy, but they get resources by eating each other. So they have sort of a lot of chaff models that they can get rid of to get resources.
I find that to be an interesting and funny mechanic where they get power from eating each other.
Yep. Yeah, they have these little guys. They have these little larvae that crawl around that are sort of like nutrient dense, basically, and they're able to convert immediately into energy. So, yeah, so they crawl around, and when the actual combat bugs need them, they have a nice little snack, and then
it's brutal. I love it.
The other faction though is called Orion Conclave. They're a little more reptilian, and
cool.
They have a lot of sort of these psychokinetic powers, and they're able to manipulate the battlefield very uniquely. So they can move enemy models around, they can push you out of cover, so that they can gun you down, and they're also very focused on sort of stealth mechanics. So their primary mechanic is that they have these. They're called adaptive combat skins, but they're basically a special combat suit that they have that's able to adapt itself, hence the name.
Is it like a chameleon sort of camouflage kind of thing?
Right, yeah, but each model type individually has a number of different enhancements they can give themselves that are basically them attuning themselves with their suit. So their basic infantry sort of start with kind of mediocre stats, but they're able to make themselves better at shooting or melee depending on what the tactical situation requires. Things like that. There's a character who makes himself like very difficult to kill. There's some models that make themselves faster to get into melee, for example. But across the faction, they have an ability to basically turn themselves invisible, which means that the next time somebody shoots at them and hits, You cancel all the dice. Instead, they miss, and then your guy places within 3 inches. So I wasn't really here the whole time. Like, I was around this corner. Yeah, people are just trying to spray bullets around and try to
Wow,
find
that's
stuff.
cool. And they like to eat the insects, right? Because
They yeah, they are pretty big against the insects. Yeah, the insect faction has a big weakness. They can bring more models to the table than any of the other factions. Their basic infantry are about half as expensive as anybody else's. But their big weakness is that, being insects, they sort of have to look for it to a queen essentially, or something, to tell them what to do.
Okay.
So their
So like a
officers
hive mind kind of.
so their officers are significantly more important than the rest of than they are in other factions. So the ability to move blocking models out of the way and shift their officer out so that a powerful assassin can go murder them
So
is pretty
if
important.
their officer dies, is it just game over for them?
It's not necessarily game over. My friend Zach is actually I've been playtesting with. He really likes that faction. He's been playing them a lot, and he's actually been able to come up with some pretty neat tricks once his officers have been killed. So it's not entirely game over, but it becomes very difficult to win, especially for that faction if all your officers are dead.
Who is this guy we're looking at? The back of this guy.
This is a Titan battle suit. That's another model for the Homeworld Confederacy. Essentially it's just a big mechanized there we go, there's his front, his beautiful face. It's a big mechanized combat suit essentially, that's able to carry extremely heavy weaponry. This guy, they're not nearly as mobile as the foot troops, but they put out a ton of firepower. They have some of the most powerful ranged weapons in the game, including that big missile launcher on his shoulder. That's pretty cool. It has indirect fires. It's able to shoot over intervening terrain, which is pretty important for the faction because there's a lot of cover in the game. It tends to be a lot of big buildings, and so having a way to get around it is pretty important for the Homeworld Confederacy.
Let's see. Yep, looks like your Action Cat.
Action Cat. Yeah, that's Chris Johnson gave him the wonderful moniker Action Cat. Excuse me. That's a First Claw. That's another officer for the Zrenthar faction. This model actually came out really cool, and this was a big hit, I think, with almost everybody who's seen it. But the other sort of basic officer for this faction is the pack leader, which we used in the demo, who's a lot more support oriented, giving people accuracy, and he is able to activate more troops every turn. Whereas this guy, he has a very low order value, which means he's not able to command as many infantry as a normal officer is, but he does have some of I think he has the highest melee damage output in the game currently. And he's able to give out Fury tokens when he destroys enemy troops. So he's a very much of a lead from the front kind of guy, jumping around and cutting people down with that big spear.
That sounds like my kind of stuff.
And then these are some of the models I painted up for our demos at Captain Con. And I was totally planning on taking some nicer pictures that aren't just on my painting table. But fortunately, the flu's hit me pretty hard this weekend, so I wasn't able to do that. Right. But hopefully, we'll have some better pictures next week up on our website and on our Facebook page. We have some cool custom terrain we got that I want to set them up with, but unfortunately,
cool.
Time to do that. But these are some of the demo models we had for the Zrenthar. For Captain Khan, you can see the 2 pack warriors on each side, and then the pack leader models in the middle. And then this is a picture I took of the First Claw there on the left, and then the battle suit on the right before I started painting them. And then here are the Confederate models we had for the demo. The guy in the back there doing the hand signal is a fire team leader, so he's basically just a generic officer for this faction. He's able to shift models around outside of their activation, which is pretty useful, especially if you have multiples of them, so that you can actually got a lot of out of activation movement. But other than that, he's essentially just kind of a souped up rifleman, and then you can see the 3 riflemen in the top there.
And we're back to the beginning.
And we're back.
All right,
We're
let's go back
back.
to those big screens. So we got questions that we want to ask about it.
Cool.
Now, of course, the 3D renders are more detailed, have more sculpting and different lines and stuff than your 3D prints. What type of thing are you going to be doing whenever this goes full? What is your plans for the type? Are you going to be doing resin? You're going to be doing plastic? You're going to be doing, what
Metal?
metal? What are your thoughts and plans on doing that?
Yeah, so what we have worked out right now is that the models would be the final versions will be basically a spin cast plastic, which would be sort of a resin plastic mix, which is kind of a happy medium between the two. So it's not quite as fragile as resin.
Not for those of us who like to file mold lines.
Right. Yeah. um, so it'll be more robust than resin, but we don't have the same sort of upfront cost that we would have to do injection molding essentially. The other cool thing that lets us do is we're able to dye the molds so that or dye the casts so that we're gonna have all of the models in their factions color. So for the people who haven't yet got to painting their models, they'll still have they won't just be boring gray, which will be fun.
I like boring gray.
Yeah.
Paint over it.
Friday, I was listening to you, and you recently did your first demo of the game at a big convention, which was Capticon. How did that go, by the way?
It was awesome. We ran over 50 demos, which blew me away. It was a lot.
One thing that you said on there that one person said that the models seemed to be too small, and you said that you were going to increase their size. That they said that because what are they? Were they 30 millimeter?
So yeah, they're essentially right now they're based on a 30 millimeter. And the way we have it right now is that they're not quite heroic scale, which means that sort of heroic scale has kind of blown up. A lot of physical features are blown up, so like hands and faces and weapons usually tend to be a little expanded, and we're a little more on the true scale side of that. But we're at about 30 millimeters right now, and the reason I brought that up on the stream is that actually multiple people mentioned that they'd like to see the models a little bit bigger, especially painters who wanted a little bit bigger of a canvas to paint on. And so definitely taking that to heart, and I think we're gonna bust up about 5% and get to about 32 millimeters.
Okay.
I think 32 or 33 seems to be the average of what game companies are producing these days.
Yeah, they say like 28 to 30, but it's really like 30.
It's like Malifaux, for instance. I think they actually say it's 33 millimeters. So,
Yep. So that's where we're going. I did on a lark. I printed out one at that was about plus 10%, so it was about around 35 millimeters or so, and it was way too big. It reminded me of like the Star Wars Legion models that when you look it up, I was just like, this is weird.
Yeah, you don't want to get too crazy
Right.
and
So-
go too big with
right.
them. I mean, eventually, and maybe even as a Kickstarter like way stretch goal, you could offer like some kind of decorative larger size, like 54, 72 millimeters, something for people who want to go crazy with the painting for display.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's actually something I was talking to people at Captain Con. They were interested in, especially the marine models are pretty intricate. When you get in, they have a lot of details of the technology on their armor, which is really cool. And a lot of people were like, "Man, I would paint a 6-inch tall version of this."
Yeah, I mean, at a smaller scale, a lot of that detail gets lost.
Yeah.
But at a larger scale, I mean, you don't want to make the game that much because otherwise your footprint for the table is going to be enormous.
Yeah, for sure.
So let's get into the rules and everything because Kathy's all about the hobby. I'm all about the rules and the gameplay, and I've already seen it. I've already played a couple of games. I've already tested it out, even with some of my students and stuff. So each faction has their own little shtick.
Sure.
So the Human Federation has the ability to what makes them unique to the other factions?
So they have a rule that's common across all their models called Concentrate Fire, which assigns Concentrate Fire tokens to models that they shoot at the end of their activation. And those tokens basically say that if you have Concentrate Fire, you get extra accuracy for each token that's on the target. So essentially, the more they focus fire on single targets, they kind of cascade their accuracy, and they get more and more powerful the more they work together as a team, essentially.
Okay. And excuse me, I don't know all the full names. The cat people.
Yeah, the Zrenthrar, they have their whole faction has a rule called Vengeful, which says that when a friendly model dies within 6 inches, they get a Fury token. They have a lot of their faction is actually really interesting because they have a lot of sort of economy built into it, working with these Fury tokens. There's a support model in the faction called the Dream Speaker, who's a psychokinetic, basically a psychic powers, and they're able to move those Fury tokens around. So if somebody's about to die and you're going to lose all those Fury tokens, you can put them on somebody else who's can make more use of them. And then their basic infantry have a special action they can do, which says that they'll give out an additional Fury token when they die. So you can kind of start with a wave of like kind of chaff, and then when they go down, your more powerful models who are backing them up are going to hit really hard. Okay.
And the insect ones?
So they also use Fury tokens, similar to the Zrenthrar faction, but they use them in different ways. So basically, they get them when they eat each other. They have a special action they can do called Consume, and they kill somebody within 2 inches of them, and they get 2 Fury tokens, which is a lot actually. But some of their models have different ways of spending Fury tokens. So for example, there's a model called the Spitter who has an AoE ranged attack, and they're able to add different modifiers to their ranged attack by doing an action, the cost of which they can spend using those Fury tokens. So they can basically, eat little guys and use them to load their gun, basically, and then they can apply debuffs to any models. They can even apply infestation tokens, which basically work like a little chest burster from Aliens, where when you kill them, a little crawler who's their basic infantry pops out, and so that's pretty fun.
Do you have any concept of the art of that concept art of them coming out?
I mean, yeah, it will be coming out. I don't have it right now, but
okay,
we'll definitely, yeah. We're focusing on the Conclave faction right now, is what we're on.
And is that your last one?
Yeah. So that's the sort of they're a reptilian kind of psychic faction, and they have they basically in the final design is basically they're going to have a separate stat card. So they'll have a card. We actually have some of the cards from our demos over here. So here's what the card looks like. Ooh. And they'll have a separate one. This is a little big. We blew it up for the demo. We'll probably have it on like a tarot card size, so it'll be I don't remember the exact dimensions of that, but it's probably like 4 inches by 2 inches or so. But they'll have a separate 2.5 by 3.5 card that has a list of enhancements on it. And that's the abilities that their suit can give them. And they're able to assign tokens to those abilities. And they have a lot of their officers have a lot of economy based on those tokens. So you have models that say, like, when you assign a token to an enhancement, you can pick another model within 6 inches, and they can assign a token to the same enhancement and stuff like that. So they can become really efficient in how they're able to turn on these different systems in their suits.
Okay. Who's doing, and if you can't answer, that's okay. Who's doing your 3D modeling and your cards and your token sets? I know you said Broken Egg was doing your token sets.
Yeah, so
the plastic ones.
I've been working with Chris Johnson and Mechanica Studios to do all the graphic design. So he's been absolutely awesome to work with. He's done all of our cards. And he's gonna do some and our tokens as well. And he's gonna do some other work for us in the future. I don't know. I haven't talked to the sculptors about sort of giving up their names, so I don't know.
Okay, that's no problem. Oh, we understand. Because Chris is doing stuff for us too right now. So Chris and I we've been friends for 12 or so years. So I know what he does. He's really good at his stuff. Now, I've looked at your gameplay, and you have some unique things that how the game is set up. Because typically on most games, you just lay out terrain, you put out your miniatures, you lay out scenario and objectives, and you go for it. Your setup is a little bit different, which I actually kind of like, but I have some questions about it.
Sure.
So, can you describe how your terrain is set up and how it's set up for a game,
Yeah. So,
and
like I
why
was
it's this
saying,
way?
sure. Like I was saying before, all of the scenarios in the game are asymmetric, and actually, when you build your list to play a game, you actually pick your objectives while you're building your list. So you have an attack and a defense objective, and then essentially the player who's going first is the attacker, and they deploy their attack objective, and the other player deploys their defense objective, and then that determines how you're going to score for that game. And basically, how you're going to win is that you're going to be able to complete your objective every turn and stop your opponent from completing their objective, basically. So the combination of the two objectives works in a kind of synergistically to create a whole scenario. Then when you're setting up the table, there's a pool of terrain, and the plan is to include that as punchboard terrain inside the kit when you buy it. So it's kind of 2D terrain friendly, but all of the terrain rules are super abstract. So you can use basically whatever terrain you have on hand or whatever you want, or you can model it specifically to fit on the templates essentially. For an example, there's a template called obscuring terrain, which basically blocks line of sight, but you can still move through it. And on one of our tables that we've created, we have it's a kind of a desert theme, and we have a dust cloud that represents that terrain. But on another table, we have a jungle. And both of those mechanically work the same because they're both obscuring terrain, but they're very different depending on sort of what the theme of the table is, basically. So the way it works is that the attacking player places a piece of terrain on the table, and then the defending player places a piece of terrain, and you go back and forth until all the terrain's placed. So the players take turns deploying all the terrain before the game starts. And the idea behind that is between the objective and the terrain placement, all of that is factored into the strategy of the game, like before you even deploy a model. So thematically, a crack team of special forces operatives would do their best work to scope out and find sort of the best terrain for them to try to complete their objective. You know, they're going to approach it in a certain way. And to try to represent that, we had players deploy the terrain, but it also you're sort of never, you know, in a competitive format, you're never going to be kind of, you know, screwed by a TO who wants to put down a huge river in the middle of the table or whatever, or something like that. So you always have control over what your terrain is going to look like, and over the, you know, enormous number of test games that we've ran, we've never really had the same table come up twice. And it's always cool because we kind of can create a narrative based on the terrain that's being put down. So if all the buildings on the table get put in one corner, you know, it ends up looking like we're on the outskirts of a settlement. But if they're scattered around, it looks like we're on a kind of a thoroughfare of a larger you know, city or something like that. So I think it ends up working really well.
And I'm sure there's rules about placing terrain, like can you put things on top of each other?
No, it has to go at least 2 inches from any other piece of terrain, and then most of the terrain has to go at least 2 inches from a scenario element. And none of it can go within 6 inches of a board edge, so you can't just like pick up terrain and throw it in the corner if you don't want to deal with it.
Nice. Okay.
What about the 3D aspect? So is there a height, like fall distance or getting up and getting down, or is it just considered all just one?
Yeah, so currently there's no, there aren't kind of leveled terrain. There's no verticality in the terrain. That was something that we considered while we were creating the game. But one thing that I'm pretty, I think is pretty important is that the game be 2D terrain friendly. Because that's not something that you really see in a sci-fi game. Normally, you know, even 40K, if you don't have a lot of terrain, you know, you don't have a store with a lot of terrain that is ready to go, you end up, you have to schlep around a whole bunch of extra stuff to play a game of 40K. And Infinity, I think, is the worst offender for this. Like, the tables look amazing, but I've seen people to go play Infinity at their local store. They have to bring a whole briefcase full of extra buildings and things like that. And that was, that was something I was trying to avoid. I think certainly for narrative play, and sort of more casual things, absolutely, we're going to create rules for verticality. For sort of the core system and the competitive aspect, we'll stick to 2D stuff for now.
Okay, let's get into the nitty gritty. How is the game ran? What's our dice pool? What's our dice mechanics like? Is it I roll 1d6, 2d6? Is it just simple? I mean, do we use d12s? We saw the d6s in there, which is the common one. But I mean, how is it? What's the core easy mechanic that you could go through?
Sure. Essentially, the attack mechanic is really interesting, and people at Captain Con were really were actually really impressed by it, which I really liked. They tended to pick it up pretty fast, which is something I was a little worried about, because explaining it to people takes a couple of steps. So I have some dice, and I wonder if I could run through an attack real quick, if that makes sense.
Oh, go ahead.
I can point my camera at the table.
Okay.
Let me try this. Let me give this a shot.
Crotch cam.
I'll point my camera at my desk here, and I'll grab some dice, and we'll take a quick look-see. So let's say I have a card. Let's see. I don't know if anybody can read this card, but on your card, you have your weapon statistics here. Each weapon has an accuracy value, which is the number of d6s you roll when you make an attack. So let's say, this is a rifleman. If he's making an attack with his combat blade, which is melee attack, he's accuracy 4, so he'll roll 4 dice. So what you do is you pick your top 3 dice from the roll. So I got a 3, and then a 4, 5, and 6. So that was a pretty good roll. If I was playing Ship Captain Crew, I'd be really super happy. You always pick the top 3 dice in the roll. So I would get rid of the 3, and I would be left with a 15. So if I was making an attack against this pack warrior, you have an evade value, which is basically your defense if you're playing War Machine. And you subtract the evade from the... somebody keeps texting me. I'm going to turn that off. Get out of here. All right. You subtract the evade from the die roll. So you have an 8. And then you take a look at your chart. So that was actually a really good roll. Your chart has 3 different sort of result ranges. You have a glancing hit, which is on this guy is a 2+. So if the result of the 3 dice minus the evade was a 2+, I would get a 4. If it was a 5+, I would get a 6. But I got an 8+, so he does 7 damage. So if he was using his ranged weapon, for example, he's only accuracy 3. So he's going to roll 3 dice, and he's not going to get rid of any of them. So he would get a 10. If I was shooting at an evade of 7, my result would be a 3. And a 3 on his chart is his glancing hit, which is 2+, or 2 damage.
What about... now, do they have armor like they soak, or is it that built into the evade?
So they have... Take a look at some cards here. So you can see on the side here, there are these little defenses, and most infantry just have 1. But models like this guy is a pack leader. He has multiple, and you can pick from them. And basically, you can pick one of those and apply it to the attack. So armor reduces the amount of damage that the weapon would do. So the amount of damage that your chart says. So if I was doing 7 damage, he would reduce it to 6.
Gotcha.
Most officers have this resist defense, which halves the amount of incoming damage.
Now, I know you have a special thing that goes with the officers, that the officers actually do something besides be a team leader.
Mm-hmm.
And they're not just the unit command. They actually do something in the game besides stand there and have a little bit better stats. What do the officers or leaders do specifically that change the way the game's played?
Yeah, so basically the way the round structure of a game works is that you have it's essentially alternate activations. So I pick a model to activate, and then you pick a model to activate. The twist is that you have to start by activating your officers, and your officers have order tokens, which they can then spend to activate infantry models that are around them. So if you have 2 or 3 officers, usually what happens is you each end up taking 2 or 3 turns, like sort of little mini turns, where you activate an officer and then a couple infantry, and then your opponent activates an officer and a couple infantry, and then you go back and forth until all the models have activated. In addition, officers also have bonuses they can give out. They can spend order tokens instead of activating guys to give them buffs, to give out accuracy, sometimes to heal models, all sorts of things depending on the officer in question.
Okay. So whenever we're playing, so say you and I are playing a game,
Sure.
and we've done the roll to deploy.
I would like that gun.
Well, I'll be at Adepticon, and we can do a demo game, and I will stream it for us.
Sweet.
We're going to be Kathy and I are going to be doing a lot of stuff like that. So we'll video it and put it on there so people can see what a demo game looks like. So say you and I we've rolled and set up our terrain, and our terrain's set up, and what's deployment like? I mean, is it model, or is it whole faction, like War Machine Hordes?
Yeah, the attacking player sets up all their models, and then the defending player sets up all their models. Okay. The board is on a 3x3.
Okay.
And the deployment zone for each player is 12 inches up from their table edge. So you're able, if you want, you can deploy very far forward. And the attacking player, if they want to, they can put a ton of pressure on the defending player by deploying right up at the 12-inch line. The defending player does have some counterplay in that they can stay out of threat ranges by just deploying a little bit farther back.
And I'm guessing it's all pre-measure.
Yeah, you can pre-measure whatever you want.
Yeah. And so you were talking alternating turns, and you were saying, I activate one of my leaders. That leader says, this guy's going to move, and this guy's going to move, and this guy's going to shoot. And then you go with one of your leaders?
Yeah,
okay.
Essentially.
So what happens if I've got all my leaders, and they've done everything, but I still have 2 guys that weren't part of that group in the leader? What happened to those 2 guys?
So once you basically go to look to activate another field officer and you can't, you just activate a normal infantry.
Mm-hmm.
And the normal infantry don't tend to be quite as effective if they don't have an officer telling them what to do. You can imagine that they're a little confused. They don't have any guidance. Somebody please help me.
So what happens if my officer dies? What about those other guys?
So if all of your officers are dead, then basically every time it's your turn to activate a model, you would activate a single infantry.
So it's definitely beneficial to keep your officers alive.
Right. Yep.
And
yeah.
What do they have to keep them alive then? Besides being just sniped out? I guess is the best word to put it.
So they have across the board, almost every officer has the resist defense, which is they're able to reduce incoming damage by half. So they're significantly more resilient than a regular infantry who's not going to have that. They tend to have around the same sort of base number of hit points, but because of that defense, it's usually functionally about twice as many. They're about twice as hard to kill.
And what about terrain? Is there negatives to hit me if I'm sitting behind a certain amount of cover, or what are bonuses and negatives of terrain? So
basically, there's sort of 2 ways of getting defense from terrain. Most of the terrain on the table gives you cover if you're base to base with it. So if you're base to base with a piece of cover, in the example that I showed, where you're rolling dice to attack. But if your target is benefiting from cover, what you do is before you pick your 3 dice, you discard the highest result of the roll. So if I was only 3 accuracy and I rolled a 6, I would get rid of the 6 and I would be left with only 2 dice. So it's significantly more difficult to hit people if they're behind cover. If they're not touching a piece of terrain, but they're still behind it, or if they're in obscuring terrain, which is like the clouds or forests, like I was talking about before, then they're obscured, which instead of removing the highest result of the roll, just removes the die before you roll. So it's not quite as impactful, but it's still pretty annoying, especially if you don't have a lot of dice in your pool to start with.
How do I know that a piece of terrain is going to provide cover? Is it just because that's when I lay it down, this one says cover? or does it
So
matter about height of the volume? Are y'all doing volumes?
essentially, there are um, there's only a couple types of terrain that are in the pool. There's obstructions, which are basically like they are in War Machine. They provide cover, and they're big buildings or rocks or
Hmm.
big solid pieces of terrain. There are low obstructions, which are in talking in War Machine terms, it would be like linear obstacles. And there's a couple different shapes that are in the pool. But they're basically like obstructions that you can see over. So they still give you cover, but you're able to see and move over them. And then there's obscuring terrain and difficult terrain. And obscuring terrain blocks line of sight if you're not in it, essentially. And if you're shooting at somebody who's in it, then they would be obscured. And then difficult terrain doesn't provide any benefit, but slows you down if you're moving into it, obviously. Um, but so essentially, all of the obstructions and the low obstructions give cover if you're base to base, or you obscure you if you're behind it and not base to base, and then the obscuring terrain obscures you if you're in it. And that's basically it. That's like all the terrain rules we have currently.
What about movement? Because I did notice that on some of the cards there was like looks like some movement values. Do you have like a run, a charge, or is it just like everybody moves at one speed?
So basically, how it works is that when you activate, you have a number of actions. Most models in the game have three or so. There are some officers that have more, and some models are able to use different tokens to in place of actions, essentially. But for each action, you can make an attack or a move. And so there's no real rule for running, but you could just spend all your actions to move if you wanted.
Gotcha.
One of the things we wanted to kind of make all the models feel super badass, and because like they're kind of these like special operations commandos, so we wanted to make them feel like action heroes. So all of the activations in the game are like super freeform. There's not order you have to do anything in. Like in War Machine, like you have to move and then you make your attacks. But in this game, like if you start in melee, you could stab the dude who you're in melee with, and then you pull out your sidearm and you cap another guy, and then you run around a corner and shoot another guy. You can have these like crazy activations where your guy does a bunch of different things, and it feels really cool.
Okay. How do you win?
So you can murder everyone who is opposing you,
Okay.
or in a regular full scale game, whoever at the end of each round, whoever has at least 3 scenario points and more than the opponent wins immediately. So essentially, you can prolong the game by scoring at the same rate. So if you're both scoring a point a turn, essentially, which is about the rate at which you score, then you can just tie every turn. But basically, as soon as you're able to score your scenario by doing whatever it is you need to do and stop your opponent, then you'll win. In the as an example, in the demo, we didn't have a threshold of 3. We basically said as soon as somebody has more points than the other person, then they'd win. The Zren player could score by just moving their intelligence into that clear zone we talked about.
Mm-hmm.
The homeworld player could score by pressing the button on their little console they had to interact with. At any point, if you were able to stop your opponent doing that before the end of the round and do your part of it, then you would win.
Oh, there was something on my mind I totally forgot. Being that it's on a 3x3, it seems like actions pretty much start and the combat starts really quickly. Like you're not having a turn to really set up.
You're
Right.
not maneuvering.
Yeah, there isn't really there's no like turn run that like there is in War Machine where all your dudes get up to their positions. You can definitely if you're not really paying attention and you screw up your deployment, you can have some bad surprises if your opponent has long threat ranges. There don't tend to be threat ranges that are super long that are also like impactful, because
No.
the more go ahead.
By threat range, do you mean like the distance the weapons can fire and stuff?
Yeah, basically, it's a term we use in War Machine a lot, but basically the distance at which you can move and then also make an attack.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not a War Machine player.
Yeah,
So.
that's fine. Yeah, I gotcha. I'm using a lot of silly terminology.
Yeah.
But because you have to spend action tokens to both move and attack, the farther you have to move, the less attacks you're going to make. So a lot of times, like, you can move really far and hit a person one time, but your hit's not going to kill them. like they'll be tickled a little bit, and then
Yeah, so
Yeah.
probably
they're
That
not
makes sense.
they're not what no, nobody's a one wound model per se.
right. Yeah, you can see on some of the cards like the median. We have little damage tracks up here, like in War Machine, and the median hit points tends to be about 12. So
Okay.
it takes quite a bit to put somebody down. But if they're out in the open and taking a bunch of fire, they can definitely go down pretty fast.
Yeah.
What was the question Xander had?
Xander was wanting to know
I'm
about.
trying to go back.
He was talking about the exosuits, and he was asking if there was like a jumping or a bonus movement because they were wearing exosuits.
Oh, the for the homeworld guys.
Or yeah, do
No,
do the
they
do those guys have a super jump for the exoskeleton?
currently they don't. Unfortunately, the suits weigh quite a bit, so they're they don't propel themselves in the air right now. But
They don't have super
some
hydraulics.
design space there.
What's the standard average? I guess to say range distance of weapons and movement. Because I'm guessing like cat people may move a little faster.
Yeah, so they move 5 inches with every move action rather than 4, which is what most of the other factions have. Um, so yeah, 4 to 5 inches is usually what a move gets you. There are also other actions that can make you a little more efficient in making attacks. There's an assault action, which is a 3-inch move, and then a melee attack, and a storm action, which is a 3-inch move and a ranged attack. Those make things a little more fluid. A lot of the Zren Thrar models have both assault and storm, so they're able to make these, do these cool activations where they can like move and then storm and shoot you, and then assault and hit you with their sword, and they can get a lot of damage
I
on
knew
the
I
way.
like the cat people.
Yeah, yeah. So you can imagine they're jumping around a lot and blasting away at you as they're kind of moving from cover to cover, which is pretty fun. For the ranges, 12 inches is the longest range in the game so far. Most range weapons are 8 to 10.
Okay. So
Do you see
you're not
yourself having like a heavy weapon option that shoots like like 20 inches or something, 24 inches?
Probably not. One of the things that we want to we want to make the game revolve around is sort of a little more of a frenetic kind of close range engagement. Obviously the game's called Breachstorm, and that's that comes from, that's like you want to kind of give the idea that you're kind of breaching a building and then storming into it, which is obvious.
Okay.
That is a very close range engagement, which not necessarily exactly what's in the game, but that's the kind of idea we want to get across.
That makes sense. Well, and I guess on a 3x3,
right,
you're not going to have a long range thing. And I'm like, yeah, I'm still on the whole 4x6 kind of table.
Right.
So in my head.
Yeah, because if you think of someone going game mechanics, someone has a 14-inch range on their gun. They move 4. Now they've got 18 inches worth of threat. They move 4 more. They've got pretty much almost the entire board. That they can hit. So you've got to kind of, it's got to be short type range combat, or you just be like, I'm gonna take all the long range guys, shoot, 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 shoot. Then it would be counterintuitive to what the game is supposed to play like. When you were talking about the different activations where everybody can do kind of 3 things. So say I'm in hand-to-hand combat or next to a guy, okay? Are there ranges like weapons like the melee range is 1/2 inch, a sword is 2 inches type thing, or is it all base to base?
So most models have a 1-inch melee range.
Okay.
Some models have a 2-inch melee range, which is kind of exceedingly powerful in the game right now. That first Clob model I was showing you earlier has a 2-inch melee range, and then a defense called Dodge, which they can use in response to an attack, which moves them 2 inches, which is very difficult to deal with if you're primarily ranged focus, because they can move in and engage you at 2 inches, and you aren't able to make ranged attacks while you're engaged, and also you can't make melee attacks because they're not close enough yet. And then you can move out. There's no free strikes or anything in the game. Because it was actually, we found originally that was actually way too powerful, but you can move out and shoot them again, and they'll just move back into melee with you. So they can They're really kind of abusive. But yeah, most things are 1 inch. There are a couple 2 inch things, which tend to be pretty powerful.
So here's what I'm thinking. So each model has pretty much 3 actions, is what you're telling me,
Just about, yeah.
within an average. And so I've got 2 models. I can do the 3-inch move, stab a guy with a knife,
Hmm.
move back behind cover, and then shoot a random guy, you know, off to the right that has like 1 hit point left. So I could put damage on one guy, backflip over the terrain feature. I'm just saying backflip because I'm a superhero,
I
and
mean,
then
absolutely.
shoot the other guy that's down, that's got 1 hit point, and
Yep.
do
Gun them down
gun him down.
ruthlessly. Yep.
Um,
Nice. That's
Absolutely.
cool.
You can do all of those things.
that's cool. What about characters? We're kind of going in a little bit of media section, but I don't want to. I kind of want to go with this. You were talking about there was named characters. Is
There are
there's going to
named.
be everybody has generic leaders and then everybody has named leaders, and of course you can only take one of that named leader. I'm guessing
Hmm.
type thing.
Yep,
Okay.
exactly. There is we didn't have them so much in the demo cards that we printed out, but there
Of
is
course.
also an upgrade system that so you can customize all of your you can customize models in your team, but you can also make the generic models sort of a little more flavorful. So there's upgrades you can give them additional equipment, additional sort of sidearms and things like that. But you can also give them traits. So they are benefits and or drawbacks that you can have to make each of your models unique. So I could have a whole team that's like 6 identical dudes, but I could have them all with slightly different abilities if I wanted to. Kind of make them a little more unique if I wanted to make my little like Saving Private Ryan Band of Brothers kind of individual guys. This
Federico.
guy's exactly like this guy's the sharpshooter. He's a little better at shooting people behind cover. And then there's one I think is great, which is it's called Craven, which says that your model gets suppression tokens every time he's damaged. So he has a harder time moving the more he gets shot at, but he's more effective behind cover. So like you can have interesting things like that where you can make your models more unique, and you can find cool combos in between the different upgrade cards as well.
Um,
Now, have you considered having bits since you can, modify weapons and stuff?
Absolutely, yeah, definitely. Something we wanted. There's a couple generic upgrades that add equipment, and one thing we definitely want to do is do sort of faction specific upgrade sprues, basically that'll have different faction specific versions of that weapon, which I
That'd be
think
cool.
would be awesome. That's something that we'll probably get into down the road. Also stuff we want to do are like, faction specific objective models that you can have with your objective and all sorts of stuff like that. Absolutely stuff we want to get into.
That's cool. Yeah.
so WYSIWYG is not going to be a thing when it starts out. So if I'm going to buy, say, what's your, what's your buying value? Is it like a model is 1 point? I'm going to buy this thing on them, increases this point value, et cetera, et cetera. Whenever you're saying you're going to build a game, or
Yeah.
like War Machine Short at 75 points, but in like 40K it's 2,000 points, but then you have to buy all the upgrades in that, so you're not getting full 2,000 points worth of models. You're getting 2,000 points worth of models and their upgrades.
Right. So it's the upgrades do cost points, and your models cost points. Most models cost, like most infantry cost like 8 to 12, and officers are 16 to 20 ish. You have 100 points to spend for a full game.
It seems like you can make a pretty unique team.
Yeah,
With all the different upgrades, ability upgrades, weapon upgrades, and all that stuff. Like no two would be alike.
Yep. There's we wanted to put in a lot of customizability, so even though it's like a sort of a small it's a low model count, you can still make your team feel unique for yourself.
That's good. I think that's a good thing because it kind of, we all can have generic Joe the Rifleman, but Joe the Rifleman that can aim better. And Frederico with the wily mustache can, run faster, or,
Yeah.
type thing could be something different, which I think is good. Anything else you want to tell us before we go to our media section?
Yeah, anybody who's interested in playing the game, we have an open beta coming up. Those the full rules for the first two factions initially, and all the core rules obviously will be online before the end of the month. I don't have an exact date yet. Um, but you can, if you follow us on social media, we're on at Breachstorm on Twitter and Instagram, and then facebook.com/Breachstorm on Facebook. You can stay abreast of all the updates there. We have a website that should be going up relatively soon at breachstorm.com. But yeah, we'll have all the rules available if you want to just proxy out some games. And if we have enough response with the beta, we'll probably do some giveaways of models and things if people want to show us their battle reports. And then obviously a couple weeks down the road, we'll also have the full rules for the next two factions available, as well as probably we'll try to get some paper doll models if people don't want to proxy, and then we'll have the little printable models they can put on bases if they need.
Which is a good way to start out when you're just playing the beta. I like that idea.
Yeah. So so anybody who wants to give it a try will be able to. And then our Kickstarter is going live this summer. I don't have an exact date right now, but probably in the August, July August timeframe.
Okay.
And so we'll we have a little bit of a ways to go. I know we talked about a little bit. We're going to increase the scale of the game a little, and we have some stuff to change up with our sculpts. But we definitely like to give out updates to everybody. So if you follow us on that social media, you'll be able to see all the cool art that we're coming out with. It's going to be awesome.
So Gen Con is at the beginning of August. Is that going to have an effect on when you decide to start your Kickstarter?
I'm not super sure. I don't know if I'm not. I don't. We unfortunately don't have like a booth at Gen Con. We got a little. We were a little slow on the uptake and didn't end up grabbing one. But I contacted them and they're like, "Yeah, everything sold out a month after Gen Con last year." Like, oh.
Yes. Yeah. You need to get in on the day of.
Yeah. One thing we're talking about is maybe splitting a booth with somebody who's already going.
Sure.
That might happen, but I don't, obviously don't have any.
Fingers crossed, because that would be a really cool place to do some demos before your Kickstarter goes live and get the word out.
Yeah, but we're also at Adepticon, so we have a booth at Adepticon. So if anybody's,
we'll look forward to playing some demos there because this sounds like a lot of fun.
Yeah, so far people have really enjoyed it, and I'm excited to show more people for sure.
You keep on saying we. Who are you allowed to say it's on your team?
it's mostly the royal we. It's mostly me. I do have a couple locos that I play test with pretty commonly, and we throw around a lot of ideas. I also, most of the the groundwork gets done. I kind of have a team of freelancers I'm working with to do the illustration and a lot of the art, and as well as the sculpting. Most of the sort of game design and kind of background stuff is myself, though.
So when you get models ready, you're going to tell me so I can try to paint them up, and Kathy's going to tell me how to paint them. Because I'm a horrible painter and I'll just make them look like crap, right?
He's not a horrible painter. You know what? Do those ones that have the metallic like armor? Is that the cat people, the Zen Thrar that you were painting that had the metallic? Because I've seen the way you do that metallic, like the armor and stuff, and you're very good at that.
Yeah, I want to see the other two factions because I'm interested in all of them. Just because it seems pretty interesting. Of course, I want to see what the concept art and stuff is for the insect ones, and of course, your psychic ones to see what they do.
The reptilians. That sounds really cool because my husband has a thing for lizard men, and so.
Yeah, I had a long and passionate love affair with lizard men in Warhammer Fantasy. So
that was Jim too. Yeah,
that was a transitional period in my life, and I think probably it is going to come across in the game.
Oh wow, that's cool.
All right, let's get to something, and let's let Trevor kind of rest his voice for a second. Let's go to media section and talk about what we watched this week. Come on, media section, load up. All right. I have roughly two
Happy
things to
for
talk
Sammy
about.
again.
I have two things to talk about. Kathy, what do you got to talk about this week? Anything?
I've been snowed in, and usually that means I would be watching stuff, but mostly I've been reading books about that were written in the 1920s, 19 teens, 1920s, because you get the mega pack of books for like 99 cents on Amazon, and I've been having a lot of fun just sort of immersing myself in the culture of the early 1900s in America, and it's because these books were written then, like people were excited that a house had electricity and that they could just flip a switch and the lights go on, you know, or they had the telephone and the way they would write it would be apostrophe PHONE, like it's the phone, not the telephone. And phone would be slang, and slang is not what, if you're of an upper class, slang is beneath you. That's the kind of thing that, the blue collar, workers use. The poor folk like us schlepping, grunts, we use slang. But
What?
you don't use words like phone and car. That's slang. You say motor car and telephone. It's a whole new world. It's funny because it's America, but it's not America. It's very different. Also, I did finish the series Dark
Hmm.
that I was talking about 2 weeks ago, the German series. Jim watched it with me. We were riveted until the very end, although I have to say that any series that thinks that being supernatural and having the Antichrist, appear or be prophesied, you know, thumbs down. I'm done with the whole the Antichrist is coming kind of thing. Done with it.
So, for the entire series, how many shots of Kraken do you have to take to watch it?
Uh, 3, because it's so damn slow. I mean, I really liked it, but oh my God, people, let's get a faster pace. Maybe it's because it's German. I don't know. I've seen other German shows that had a much faster pace. I used to watch Tatort, the detective series,
Hmm.
and that was a lot of fun. But yeah, this one, slow pacing. The storyline is interesting, but I was disappointed, when they brought in the Antichrist. I'm like, really?
Been there, done that. He's president.
How
I mean,
many antichrists do we have to suffer through?
Yeah, right. I mean, on Lucifer, it's expected, but really. So that's my media stuff. So what do you have, Gonzo? Or does Trevor have something that he's watched recently?
I finished Altered Carbon recently, but Gonzo said he wanted to go through that, so I won't take
You
his
can
steam away from
discuss.
him.
we'll
Yeah.
discuss it. Let me give my other one, and then we'll do a good discussion on Altered Carbon. I watched the new Cloverfield, the Cloverfield Paradox, which is
Oh,
on Netflix
yeah.
only. Which I'm a huge Cloverfield fan. I love the world. The first initial movie was really good, really interesting. And then the second one with was it John? Oh,
John
was it?
Goodman.
Yeah, John. A lot of people said they hated that, but I loved it because he should have won an award for that for his acting. It was
I
amazing.
Yeah, I heard it was great. I can't find where to watch it though. Like, is it streaming anywhere?
I don't know if it's streaming
Is
anywhere.
it
I bought it.
Cloverfield Lane, right?
Yeah, but so I watched this one.
I
Um,
bet I can
eh,
get it on YouTube or something.
oh, I'm
Rent.
sure you can.
I can rent it.
And so this Cloverfield is called the Cloverfield Paradox, and it's based in space. The basic story is Earth is running out of energy, gas, oil, all that stuff, kind of coming around, and so they send this spaceship up in orbit, to try to figure out, colliding particles and particle acceleration and trying to do that. And of course, they launch it off, and of course, something bad happens. And so it's through all the
Aliens.
giant
I'm just
chickens.
gonna guess. Aliens? No, the
Are they cat
Antichrist.
aliens?
They're not cat aliens.
It's
The
the
Antichrist.
Antichrist.
Um,
How dare you try to wrest yourself from the dependence on fossil fuels? Don't you know that that's my power?
and so they try to do this, and of course, something goes wrong. But as I'm watching it, I keep on getting flashbacks of Event Horizon. If anybody's ever watched that,
Who else said that?
it,
Somebody else
yep,
just watched that and said it was, yeah.
it was like
Okay.
Event Horizon, the PG version or the PG-13 version. Um, I can't.
Explain
I won't
that.
tell you what goes on because I don't. Like I said, it's a spoiler free. It wasn't bad. I was. Nothing freaked me out. Nothing made me crazy. Nothing surprised me. It was good. Um, but what I really, really want and what I really want to see is them to actually give us Cloverfield. They just need to. They just need to give us the Cloverfield stuff because they always tease us with the monster and tease us with the stuff that's going on, and so on and so forth. And they just finally need to just give us a Cloverfield movie. Need to bring us a big bad monster, everybody fighting over it, the big creature, and just give us the big bad monster fighting thing
So
that wasn't the
is it
original.
is it a Cloverfield movie without Cloverfield?
Yes and no.
Okay, I
Um,
guess you should watch it.
you should because they do a part that's on Earth and they do the part that's in space, and it all works out and it's all attached and stuff. But he just needs to come out with here's all three movies together in one, and this is the reason why it is. And like they could do, the original Cloverfield, they could go with that, the end of that, and work through the other two of things that happen and like input the, you know, why things happened in 13 Cloverfield. Here's like a a snippet, or you can go, oh, there's a building, or there's that, and that's what's happening.
You should do like an in-universe documentary
Yeah, or
about
something like
Cloverfield. That'd be cool.
that. Actually,
Have
wouldn't be
that.
bad at all.
So you don't think they were setting it up for a fourth one?
They
Or
could
was
be.
it a decisive conclusion?
There was a conclusion to the story. There was a conclusion to what was going on, but there is that teaser that they always do at the end of every Cloverfield movie, and it's there.
Like you
Uh,
think it's done, but there might be more out there.
Correct. It wasn't bad. I'd say maybe two shots of Kraken. If space, sci-fi, event horizon type things isn't your thing, but I mean it was still good. I'd watch it. I'd watch it. I recommend it just as a good. I mean, it's only an hour and 40 minutes, so it's not like it's a 2 hour show or three or
Yeah.
whatever. So maybe two shots of Kraken, not bad. But let's go with the Big Daddy because I recommended this, and I only recommended it only in seeing like half of the series, and now I've completed the entire series, and holy shit! Let's talk about Altered Carbon. Trevi, have you watched the whole thing?
I watched the whole thing.
Okay. Kathy hasn't seen anything, so of course we're gonna
I
do
haven't
spoiler
seen
free,
it yet.
guys. Spoiler
It's
free.
been recommended by two of my cousins, so
Tim Larkin tells me that the Cloverfield movie was junk. I go, I liked it. It wasn't awesome, but it was okay. Um,
yeah.
but
I've heard mixed reviews, but I
there
guess I'll
is.
check it out just in
Yeah.
case.
Yeah, it's better than a sharp poke in the eye. So,
So many things are.
so Altered Carbon. Altered Carbon is a story that is, of course, in the future. It is very much where people can download their consciousness and their life into cortical stacks in the back of their head, and pretty much can live forever if they can do it correctly. The initial story of the thing is it's a murder mystery.
I
Um,
like murder mysteries.
and that's pretty much what it is. But the whole thing is amazing.
So I have to say, not having seen it or knowing anything about it, When you say that you can download your consciousness, it makes me think of the Vacining, which was something in Frederick Pohl's Heechee Chronicles, which was written like 1,000 years ago.
Yeah.
I mean, it was like 1960s, I want to say, when he first was writing those, and it's a whole series, and it's a sci-fi series, but it basically has where you can download your consciousness and essentially, live forever in that way. So
It actually does pull from a lot of different things. It pulls from Neuromancer, which is another good old sci-fi book. It pulls from Shadowrun. It pulls, from the VR and the hacking. It pulls from Eclipse Phase, which is an RPG, which is a really good one, by the way. I'm going to probably do a review of that pretty soon. It pulls from all the sci-fi genre stuff. And it's Xander makes a good point. It's a tangled web of stories because it's not just about the murder mystery. It's about everything else that's happening there. Blade Runner's another one that kind of it pulls through. It really, the atmosphere is incredible. That's the one thing I did like. They didn't skimp on here's standard thing. Here's standard thing. Poe is an amazing character. Can't say anything about him because if I do, it'll ruin it. But he's a really good character.
he's not the Antichrist, is he?
No, he's not the Antichrist.
We're just saying that so that we keep it spoiler free, but won't you be surprised?
Yeah. Abuela, I will tell you right now, Grandma was the best part of the entire show.
Oh my God!
As grandmas often are.
Oh, this one's even better.
No, that was certainly a redeeming point of the show.
Yes, it was when you see Grandma and you watch Grandma, you just die laughing. It is hilarious, but it also touches on some really good things that it also brings in religion into it. Now that you can't die and you can download your brain and your consciousness into a disc, what about afterlife, heaven, and all that stuff? And it actually hits on that. So it actually does some pretty good stuff. It actually kind of touches on that religious factor, which is really good, and it's part of it. I like that one character can play multiple characters, which they've done in the story, where they downloaded the cortal stack, different cortal stacks into one actor, and he had to play a different range, which was really good. Combat was really good. The sci-fi was there. The different things that they did were really cool. I mean, I loved it. I can't wait for season 2, which I hope that they do. Trevor, what do you got to say about it?
I think on the whole it was like pretty, it was like decent sci-fi. It kind of asked some questions and had a lot of cool moments. Like there were a lot of cool fights and things like that. I think there were some moments that just kind of like pulled me like way out of it. The main character.
Your voice is starting to.
Kathy.
Trying to shut me off before I say anything.
Okay. Sounds like you're coming back. Oh no, they're both
Can you guys hear? Am I dead?
Sounds like Kathy's
Your
cracked.
voice
All right, nobody talk. Sounds like they're crashing.
Am I back? Oh.
Oh wait, you are now.
There you go. Oh.
Uh-oh.
There we go. All right, now go ahead, Trevi.
Okay, yeah, and my Skype just had a little mild brain freeze.
I had a little bit of a hiccup here too.
Yeah, this is like a Skype issue.
So there were some parts that kind of sort of threw out my suspension of disbelief, I guess. They were like, there were some scenes that were kind of cringeworthy, especially at the beginning. Some of the characters were like kind of hard to get a read on. The main character I'm not a huge fan of. I didn't really like him, and he spent a lot of like the first couple episodes like sort of whining about everything, and it was it was kind of obnoxious. And is it based on a book?
It is based on the book.
there were some scenes in the show where I'm watching them like this scene looks like an awkward scene in a sci-fi book, translated literally to screen, which was like, could have done without that scene. Maybe it was. I think on the whole it was pretty positive, but there were definitely some little bits, here and there that I was just kind of like, ooh, it's weird.
Well, I think
I don't want
what's
to go too far into it without spoiling things. But
yeah, and that's the hard part is you really can't talk about much besides hey, this character is really cool, the
yeah,
technology and stuff. But I think what really needs to look at is supposedly that the main actor guy is not going to be in next season. And people are like, "Oh, well, that sucks." And I go, "No, because this show can pretty
yeah.
much you
Like
can
part
cast
of the main
anybody."
conceit is that a character can exist in, being portrayed by different actors.
Correct.
Well, sure, if your consciousness is on a disc, you can insert it into anybody,
Yeah,
right? Who
yeah,
has the
essentially.
capability.
Yeah.
That's
See, I
the
don't
point.
even have to watch it to know that.
Yeah, well, yeah, and they could
But
have done that a little bit. That's what I'm saying. If they do next season, next season, they don't have to have that actor. They can just have someone else play his character from the role from what it's for, because they did leave it open to solve for something to go through, and which I think is a really good thing because you could have so much to go on because you don't have to worry about oh, John's not going to be here next season because he was a dick and wanted more money. We're like, well, guess what, John? You're now going to be
Yeah.
played by a female because we're going to put it in there. And we're going to put a female in a male's body. And, this is just stuff that can happen and you don't have to worry about it. So I think that's one of the cool aspects of the show. I love the technology in it. I love the question they have on faith and God in it, because what do they have?
It's
Because
such an integral part. I mean, different people's various religions is such an integral part of culture and human nature, it seems like, these days.
they touched on some pretty interesting subjects too. You can't die, so what stops people from doing certain bad things?
The whole, they don't have their fear in the afterlife, therefore they're all going to go crazy like Bacchanal.
Yep.
Yeah, just not going to go into it too much because I don't want to spoil it for anybody, but definitely watch it. I binge watched the first 7 episodes in one day and then watched the rest of the next.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to have to watch this and let you know what I think of it, because it sounds interesting, and it does seem like there's a few things that tune it, like the main actor being whiny. And if the main character is somebody I just want to punch, or I don't care what happens to him, like he could be hit by a bus the next day and I'd be fine with it. That annoys me when they create a character like that. I understand that writers are trying to make flawed characters because it's more interesting, but to make it in such a way that it's so irritating is really defeating.
Well, what I think is to me, knowing what the character's going through and why the character is the way he is, it to me it was okay. I didn't have a problem with it because of what he was wanting to do and say and all this other stuff. So I mean, I didn't get that. And I can't say it without spoiling of why he's whining.
Well, I mean, I'll watch it, and then
Yeah.
next time I'll let you know what I think.
I'll just tell
and then
you.
we can talk about it.
Yeah.
And spoil it for everyone.
Yeah, I'll just say right now, Poe is an amazing character, and so is Grandma is an amazing character. All the cast is really good. It touches on a lot of religious and social aspects, and deals with Methuselah and so on and so forth. So I mean, it was really good. I don't have a problem with it. I'd say maybe one shot of Kraken. Other than
All
that,
our listeners need to watch this over this next week so that we can all talk about it without spoiling it. Okay?
all right. So that's recommended.
we've-
Everybody has to go watch it.
We've
It's
run
definitely
over
a show
our-
that spoilers could totally ruin,
Yeah,
unfortunately.
we've run over our time, so
We always
we
do.
should thank Trevor Attridge for coming on and talking about his new game Breachstorm.
Also, look for his beta coming out pretty soon.
And the Kickstarter going live later in the year.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, guys, and everybody in the chat. Thanks for hanging on and listening. Definitely, if you're interested, go check us out on social media. Facebook.com/Breachstorm and at Breachstorm on Twitter and Instagram, and we'll be at Breachstorm.com in the near future with tons more cool stuff.
Yeah, you can do like I did and just Google Breachstorm.
Or you can Google it and find the 1-2-minute video on my YouTube channel. Yeah.
We also want to thank all of our sponsors. Thanks for Tectonic Dan and Tectonic Craft Studios for sponsoring this section. You're awesome, Dan. And of course, Broken Egg Games for sponsoring our podcast, which you've already said, which they're part of us and we're part of them. So thank them. Other than that, guys, it's another podcast done. Thanks for watching. I'm Gonzo.
I'm Kathy. And our special guest, Trevor.
That's me.
Good night, guys.
Good night.
Yeah, I mean, I drank all my beer and I didn't get drunk, so I'm upset.
That's because you were drinking the dragon.
Yeah.
Yeah, you gotta drink the dragon. You know?
I really need to drink more because that wasn't near enough.